Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at creating the Hangman game using JavaScript. So let's get started. So what we're going to be doing when we make the Hangman game is we're going to be playing against the computer. So the computer is going to think of a word, and then we're going to have a limited number of guesses in order to figure out what word the computer is thinking of. So this is a bit of an overwhelming project, honestly. And I'm not really sure exactly where to start, but we can start thinking about the layout of the web page. So if we think about the layout for our web page with the HTML, we may want to have an H1 element that says Hangman. And now thinking about some of the other layout parts of the page, I'm not necessarily thinking about how to style them yet, because that's going to be probably my last step. I think I'll make a separate video for styling. I always find that the most difficult. So we'll create like a sort of low-tech version here. So maybe we'll start off with a paragraph that's the directions. I am thinking of a word. You have, I don't know, 10 guesses to figure out the word by guessing letters. I will inform you whether these letters are in the word. Alright, now thinking about the parts of the information that are important for playing the game, we may have a paragraph here, and let's say that this paragraph, we'll give it an ID of word. And this is going to be where you have this sort of underscore slashes. So maybe I'll set it up with 4 as though we were guessing a 4-letter word. Of course, the number of underscores is going to change depending on what word the computer chooses. We'll put another paragraph here and we'll say, take your letter guess. Or maybe that's too direct. What letter would you like to guess? And after this, we need to get some input from the user. So if you think back to our robot interview project, BouncerBot, anytime we're getting input from the user, that's going to be an input element. Sorry, let me just do that over again. So I'll just type input and then tab, and that actually auto-generates the tag. This is an interesting one, input, because you'll notice it doesn't have a closing tag. So input type is going to be text. That looks good. All right, so we have a display of the progress so far. We've got how to guess it. It's also nice, I think, to give some feedback to the user. So let's create a paragraph with ID equal to feedback. And maybe for feedback, this would be something along the lines of, yes, the word has 2 A's in it. Something like that. And, you know what? When we guess the letter, we need to have the ability to press a button to send it in. So let's put a button here. So we've made a button element with the opening and closing tags, and maybe the text inside of that button will be guess. All right, this is starting to get to be a lot, so I think this is a good time for us to run it. Not run it, although running it is nice. I would like to pop it open in a new tab. All right, so we've got like a little bit of a Hangman game coming along, and what's nice about previewing it is that it starts to make me think about some other things that we may need for our Hangman game. So another thing that we might need for it would be the number of guesses left. So maybe up here we could have, you have 10 guesses remaining. I don't know, maybe they'll start with 10 guesses like in our directions here. And we'll give this an ID of guesses, and then camel case, because we're switching words here, guesses left. And one more thing that's sometimes nice to show is the letters guessed. So we'll create a paragraph with already guessed. You have already guessed, and then dot dot, and here we go. All right, so this isn't the prettiest layout, but I think we can imagine how we might style this to make it look a little bit better. I'm wondering if this is actually all of the HTML that we need in order to create the game. It feels like it at this stage, but we may have to come back to it as we start to code the game itself. So thinking about the JavaScript here, we're going to be taking a functional approach to our JavaScript. So what I mean by that is instead of thinking about it as a linear game where we're coding everything from scratch, kind of in one continuous thought process, I think it's nice to try to code this as functions. So what we might think about is a setup function to start. So when we set up the game, that's going to be a function. And of course, we would run the setup function when as soon as we get to the page. So to make sure that our JavaScript is working, a common thing that we do is as we start to define the setup function, we might just say alert out working. And then to run the setup function, we would say, okay, I'm going to run it now. So let's see if it's working. All right, so our JavaScript is linked in properly. It's working. Now, I don't like to get those alerts each time I run it, so I'm going to delete that because now I feel confident that my function is running properly. All right, so to think about setting up the game, the computer must pick a word. And then after the computer picks a word, really the last part of setting up Hangman is Hangman is a pretty simple game. You can imagine a more complex game where maybe you'd have to draw the board and put the players in starting locations. After the computer chooses a word, what we're going to do is we're going to start something that's called the game loop, which is most games have sort of a cycle of things that are happening. Start the game loop. So this kind of hints at two functions that we must define, which are pick a word, and then after this we need to have a function that's going to be the game loop. And this is going to be, most video games have a game loop. It's like the repeated set of actions that actually are involved in running the game. So if you think about any game you play, most games will read input from a controller or keyboard or mouse, and then depending on the input, they'll respond to it. They'll move the figures in the game, the characters, the sprites, I think they're called. They'll move the sprites in the game. They'll display those, and then it will loop over and over again. Wait for input, see what happens, draw it on the screen. Wait for input, see what happens, draw it on the screen. And we're going to have something similar here. All right, so starting off with the pick a word function, this one's a little bit simpler. In order to pick a word, we need to have a list of words. So what I did this morning is I just Googled 100,000 most common English words, and it took me through a variety of different things. I actually started with a different Google, list of common English words in JavaScript, and I found that not so useful. So this was one of my suggested searches down here, and I found this one to be pretty useful. So I think this is it. No, this one is actually one I found with the JavaScript, and I didn't know a lot of these words, like abattoir. I don't know what that means. So this seemed like almost too complete of a list. So I'm going to grab this one here, and this one here, what was nice about it, and I'm going to paste the link here. So words are chosen from this site. That way I don't lose track of this resource. I'm going to click the raw one. And from 1 to 100, it looks like maybe this is a good starting list of words. So the 100 most common words. So I'm just going to select all of these down to here. All right. And let's see. Let word list equal. It's not so good if I do that. Let's see. Maybe I can make a new file, and I'll call it words.txt. I'll paste it here. And then, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure if this has the same capabilities. No, it doesn't. Maybe it does. Hmm. Hmm. The multi-cursor is not as good here. All right, so maybe this will be something that I give you already, this list. So I'm going to actually do this in a separate file here. So I'm just going to paste these words here, and I can create a multi-cursor with this program, where now I have a cursor on the ends of each of these words, and I press comma. Before comma though, I actually want to turn these each into strings. So I'm going to put a quote, comma, and then I'm going to go to the beginning and put a quote. And now we'll see each of these as a string. So now I'm going to copy this word list. Actually, let's see. This word list is going to take up a lot of space if each word gets its own line. So maybe what I'll do is, let me go back. There we go. And this will be a little bit better for us because this list will take up a little less time. So the formatting is better here, or a little less space. So I'm going to copy this list. Let's make sure I got it right. I think I typed a button accidentally. Nope. Okay, copy. And I'll give this list to you as part of our starter code. So here's our word list. And I'm just going to paste over that word list that we formatted. All right, so when we pick a word, how should the computer pick a random word? I kind of gave it away. We want to use our generate random function, right? So I'm going to go over to the cheat sheet here. I'm going to grab our generate random function. And we can see this is one of the uses of functions is now we never have to think about what it means to generate a random number because we just have this reusable function. So I don't know where to put this. Maybe I'll put this above pick a word. So we can now use this function. So let's see. Let word position or word index equal generate random. And what we're going to choose is we're going to choose a random number from the first word, which we know has index 0, to the last word here. And the last word will be, the length of this list, but because it starts off at 0, it'll be the length of the list minus 1. So if we have 100 words here, this will be, the length of the list will be 100, and this will be 0, so this would be the 99th word. So let word index equal generate random from 0 to word list dot length. Remember, that's how we find the length of a list, minus 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say let word equal, go into the word list and pick out the word that's at this random number. So if the random number is 0, we'll pick the. If the random number is 1, it will pick of. So word index. Finally, I'm just going to do a console.log word to make sure it's working. All right, so let me refresh my page and see how it's going. Console.log, let's see. Nothing is in my console. And that actually makes a little bit of sense to me because what I forgot to do is in the setup here, I forgot to say that, oh, hey, when we run the setup function down here, as part of setting it up, we should be running the pick a word function as the first step so that the computer picks a word. Let's see if this works. Generate random is not defined. I misused it. The name generate random is actually not camel case. It's with the underscore for the space. So I should have it the same here. All right, so it picked at that time. It picked time this time. It picked has. It picked said. Cool. All right, now I noticed that some of these words, and I'm just going to do a quick scan here, some of these words are in different capitalization. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take like and I and in, they have capitals at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, whatever word you pick, let's make our new version of that word equal to word dot to lowercase. And what that will do is it will take the word and make it lowercase, because if we have uppercase letters mixed in, it will be confusing for our check. All right, so now when we load it, it should always be a lowercase word. Cool. All right, so it looks like picking a word is looking pretty good. So we've been able to pick the word. Now there's one thing that's left that's a little bit complicated, which is this word that we're picking, word here, let's say that I go over here into my setup function and I type console.log word. So hey, it was the word variable inside of this function. It should still, console.log it. I'm going to delete the console.log from that function itself. So the only place that we're logging word to the console is in the setup function. Let's see what happens. It's logging the wrong thing here. It's logging the thing with this ID equals to word. I don't really know why it's doing that. It's not logging a word from the word list. And the reason why is this word that we choose in the word list, because we're creating this variable inside this function block, it only exists inside of the pick a word function. So once the pick a word function finishes here, this word doesn't exist anymore. So there's a tool that we use in programming, which is to get things to pop out, output from functions. And so what we're going to do at the very end here is we're going to return word. And this is a new function for us that we've never seen. Let me just catch up with my semicolons here. And what this does is it outputs the variable word so that we can use it outside of our code block. And the way that we use it outside of our code block is we say, okay, when we pick a word, after running this all, this line of code is going to create an output of word. We need to store that somewhere. So we'll say, let's let a variable named word equal the output of running this function. So when we run this function, it's going to return word, that will be the output. And we're going to store that inside of the variable word. I know so many words, word up. And then we're going to log that word. So now when we do it, it should work because now we're outputting the word from the thing. All right, so I think our setup function is looking pretty good. It seems like the game is getting pretty set up, and it's time for us to jump into the behavior of the game. So thinking about the game loop, I think the game loop needs to know which word the computer has picked. So when we run the game loop here, we'll type in the game loop function, but we're going to need to input into it the word itself. So here for the function game loop, we need to create a variable which is, it's expecting to have a word inputted into it. And the word that's going to be inputted into it is going to be the word that's randomly selected. Alright, so let's see, the game loop. What is this series of actions that repeats when we play Hangman? So one thing that happens is we update the underscore guesses thing. We wait for the user to guess. And then there's some behaviors wrapped up in the waiting for the user to guess. So let's see. I think we may have to elaborate on this procedure. It's hard for me to tell the whole scope of what it's going to look like without having done it. Let's start with updating the guesses thing. So if we think about updating the guesses, it looks like the guesses is always going to be an underscore space, underscore space, underscore space, underscore. So this is wrong because I have 4 guesses here, but my word only has 3 letters. So we need to display the proper number of guesses. So first things first, we need to select this area so that we can modify it on our screen. So to select it, we're going to see, okay, this was called word. Maybe I will call this, I'm going to change the ID to hints. because I don't want it to overlap with the name that we've already been using. We already have so much words here. All right, so let me select the things in our JavaScript program that are going to be useful. So at the top here, select the stuff that will be useful, that we need to interact with. So thinking about our interactions here, we're going to be interacting with that space. So that's called hints. Let hints equal document.querySelector hints, hashtag hints, because it's an ID. Okay. So to update our guesses thing, let's see, we are going to do a how do we display the right number of little underscores here in spaces? This is kind of an interesting problem because, right, depending on the word, here it should be 3, here it should be did, here it should be on, here it should be, oh gosh, I'm so dumb, I'm just reading the words out loud. Here it should be 4, here it should be 3 spaces. Okay. So to update the number of guesses thing, what we should do is we should start off by displaying, take the word, and let's make a list version of the word. Let word list equal, and then we're going to split the word up into a list so that instead of viewing it as her, we'll view it as H, E, R. So we'll do some Googling here. How to split a string into an array, JavaScript. All right. All right, this one is going to split it into words. Let's see, maybe this one. Not this one. Turn a string into an array, JavaScript. The split method. Here's a good option, array from. And this makes really good sense if we use this, which is make an array from your string. So it's a nice built-in JavaScript function. All right, so the word list is going to be array.from, and we're going to make an array out of the word. Let's do a console.log for our word list, and let's see if things are looking good. Okay, so Ken is the word. That's coming from this console.log, and then the word list is coming from this console.log. And the reason why we're turning it into a list is once we turn it into a list, we get access to all of our list functions. So one list function that's really useful is we want to, for each of these letters, create a space here. So what we'll do is we'll do word list dot for each, and then what we'll do here is for each letter, because that's a good descriptor of the things inside of this list. So it's going to go through letter by letter. For each letter, what it's going to do is it's going to run this code block. So we have an arrow is equal, greater than to make an arrow. And then what we're going to say is take the hints place, and the inner HTML of that should equal the old hints.innerHTML. This is an error. This is an error. We'll get to why this is an error in a second. Hints.innerHTML plus, for each letter we should put an underscore and a space. All right, so let's see how this is looking. Have is making this, and that looks real bad. And the reason why it looks real bad is we have the original for from when I typed it in the HTML. So it actually looks like before we start adding on the new for, which is going to be these four right here, we want to clear out what was there before. So to clear out what was there before, we'll say hints.innerHTML should start off before we go into this loop as a blank paragraph, and then to build it in, we should build it in with the things from our list. Let's see if this works better. All right, so when the word is of, we've got 2. When the word is in, we've got 2. For but, we've got 3. For on, we've got 2. For all, we've got 3. This is looking pretty good. I think this might be a good place for us to stop video 1. We've started to get a good setup here. We've really taken a nice functional approach to this. We've broken the game down into these individual functions. So in order to run the game, we need to set the game up. As part of setting the game up, we need to have a function, which is to pick a word. So we built that function here. And we learned a new function here, which is to return the word, which is to output it from this code block. So now that word is stored somewhere outside of this function itself. Now once we pick a word, we need to jump into the game loop with knowledge of our word. Now the game loop is going to be something that repeats. We're going to end up needing to repeat a bunch of things here, but interacting with the user should be a little more complicated, so let's save that for our next video.